Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Sunday afternoon. James Franklin, Penn State, they just go out and make another, in my opinion, national championship caliber hire, bringing over Jim Knowles to take over this Penn State defense going into 2025. Now, on Sunday afternoon, we hopped on just kind of some initial reactions to the news. Want to dive a little bit deeper and talk about what this Jim Knowles defense will look like in Happy Valley going into 2025. And I think where you want to start is Jim Knowles' defensive philosophy. And I think it's very similar. Now, they go about it in some different ways, and we're going to get into that. It's very similar to Manny Diaz. It's very similar to Tom Allen. It's very similar in terms of how James Franklin clearly wants this defense to look, and that is it's not good enough just to be a good defense. We want to have a defense that can fundamentally change a football game. And you look at what Jim Knowles did at Ohio State specifically in 2024, but you make no mistake about it, they were very good the last couple of years as well. Not only 12.9 points per game allowed, number one in the country, wasn't really that close. You take a look at the pressures and the sacks and the turnovers. I mean, 10.7% sack rate, number one in the country. They were sacking the quarterback 1 out of every 10 dropbacks. Elite numbers. It's not only a defense that's not going to allow you to score a lot of points, they're going to fundamentally change games in terms of the negative plays and turnovers that they create. That's where it starts for Jim Knowles. Now, I want to get into 5 things that we'll dive into a little bit of the film, but get into a little bit about what makes Jim Knowles special as a defensive coordinator. Before we get into it, as always, the Penn State fans, it's honestly been a blast talking this defensive coordinator search over the last couple of weeks. The amount of support y'all continue to show means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. This suddenly becomes, I think, one of the biggest storylines that we have for this Penn State football team going into 2025. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into it. I want to start with something that, as a Big Ten guy like myself, a Big Ten fan like myself, a Michigan fan, this is something that I think is increasingly important in this modern landscape of the Big Ten, and that is versatility. Now, we're going to get into adaptation a little bit later, but versatility first and foremost, right? Jim Knowles is not a one-dimensional football coach. And you see a lot of defensive coordinators say, hey, this is how I want to play defense. We're going to play it one way against every single team, and we're going to try to be great at it. Yeah, that can get you some success to an extent, but you have to adapt in terms of what teams you're playing. And you saw Jim Knowles do an exceptional job of this, whether he's playing Michigan and Iowa or going out to the West Coast and playing a team like Oregon or USC. That's what the Big Ten looks like. One Saturday, you're going to Kinnick Stadium and you're playing an Iowa Hawkeye offense that's going to run 12 personnel and run the football a lot, try to road grade you into the ground. Then the next Saturday, you might be getting on a plane and going out to the West Coast and playing a team like USC, playing a team like Oregon that's going to want to get their speed in space. It's getting very difficult to try to play that same defense from a week-to-week basis and have success against all sorts of different offenses. You see Jim Knowles fundamentally change how he wants to play defense based on the opponent he's playing. You go to that Michigan film and say, hey, we know Michigan can't really throw the football. We're going to walk our safeties into the box. Caleb Down spent pretty much all game in the tackle box stopping the run, and we're going to challenge these wide receivers to get open behind us. And Michigan clearly just couldn't. And then you look at the Rose Bowl film and say, hey, we play 3 high safeties. We're taking away to the middle of the field. We're forcing Dylan Gabriel to throw the football to the boundary, which he clearly is not comfortable doing. He is a guy that can change the looks of his defense and how this defense wants to play based on the opponent he's playing. In this modern era of college football, this modern era of the Big Ten, where you're playing all sorts of different kind of offenses, that's really important. Now, the adaptation part I think is really interesting too. You saw that defense go on the road to Eugene, Oregon. They didn't get cut up, but Oregon had a lot of success on the offensive side of the football and won that football game. 2 months later, they see themselves in the Rose Bowl. Jim Knowles clearly wins that matchup. Fundamentally changed how his defense was playing, was taking away the middle of the field, was bringing some pressure packages, completely dominated the game from a coordinator standpoint in that Rose Bowl. Nothing changed. I mean, it was the same teams that we saw play in October that we saw play on New Year's Day. Jim Knowles just had this team ready to go, specifically on the defensive side of the football. The versatility, adaptation, that's probably where it wants to start. Now, getting a little bit more into the X's and O's, one of the things I love the most is the different looks he's going to give opposing quarterbacks and offensive linemen. He is going to challenge your communication up front. There's a lot of different ways you can manufacture pressure on the quarterback, and that is clearly something that's really important to Jim Knowles. It is predicated on affecting the quarterback with your front seven. He's going to give you a ton of different looks. Now, the thing he loves to do the most is some of these overload pressures, and I get into a few examples here where he is going to basically send a lot of guys on one side of the offensive line and just test your numbers. You roll the clip right here. One, we're going to manipulate the interior offensive line with this nose. And you start working in the film, hey, we're going to drag him all the way and grab the center and guard and send him to the right side of the offensive line. We're going to bring 3 guys to this 2. And you just can't block it. I mean, there's different ways you can rely on your front 4 to win and get pressure. And Ohio State did plenty of that during their time with Jim Knowles because they had some really good edge rushers. You can also manufacture pressure by being creative and putting your guys in spots to get to the quarterback. This overload pressure look is something that they spam, for lack of a better term, spammed against Indiana. Indiana could not stop it, and they just kept sending these overload looks and, creating a ton of negative plays. And I think they give you the all-22 here where what intrigues me the most is, hey, we're going to show pressure on the right side of the offensive line, but what we're going to do here with our nose is we're going to drag him to the right side. We're going to bring the center with him over, and we're going to get numbers, 2 on 3 on the outside. That's how we're going to get more pressure, and we're going to drop out here. We're going to drop in coverage on the right side. So we got 3 offensive linemen getting dragged to the right side. We're only bringing 1 guy in pressure, and we got a 3 on 2 here, free runner at the quarterback, tackle for loss, or a sack, I should say, forced fumble getting off the field. Really, really good. And they go to it in all sorts of different ways. You see, once again, against Indiana, they went to this play all the time where, hey, we are going to overload this left side of the offensive line. You don't have enough guys to pick it up, and we're going to get home. And again, it's not necessarily like they're bringing 6, 7 guys. Like in this was a 5-man pressure here, but we're dropping out our edge into the flat. We are actually playing a little bit more coverage than you would think, but we're just bringing pressure from a lot of different spots. You continue to work through the film. I think the last thing I want to talk about is some of the, delayed blitzes that you see. And we can go to the Penn State film to take a look at that. He has some really athletic linebackers, of which Penn State will have athletic linebackers too. We're going to use them in a lot of different ways. I think this one is really intriguing because, hey, we got Cody Simon right here, delayed blitz, where we're going to show a spy on the quarterback. We're going to send our nickel. And then when he gets the trigger point, he is going to close this. It's really hard to confuse this Penn State offensive line because they were so veteran. The continuity is so good. It's a very well-coached unit. Jim Knowles had himself a day creating a lot of confusion with this front 5 of this Penn State offensive line. And you end up getting another free runner. The amount of free runners, it was kind of a combination. Why did Penn State have 10.7% sack rate on the year, number 1 in the country? Yeah, they had guys like Jack Sawyer and JTT, some really, really good just individual players. And then you combine that with Jim Knowles giving you so many different looks and so many different pressure packages. Yes, he had guys that could win their one-on-ones, but he also had a lot of guys, or he also was doing a really good job putting his guys in positions to have some easy access to the quarterback. Now, a couple other things that stands out to me about Jim Knowles. I think you probably want to start next with personnel usage. And this is something I thought Tom Allen did a phenomenal job with at Penn State. Abdul Carter probably being the best example. Hey, we got an absolute difference maker. In my opinion, Abdul Carter, there wasn't a more impactful defender in all of college football in the 2024 year than Abdul Carter. Yeah, we could treat him like a traditional off-ball backer. We could treat him like a traditional edge rusher, or we can get really creative in terms of where we put him on the field, what we ask him to do to maximize his impact on the football game. And at the end of the day, that's what college football is about. It's putting your best players in spots to be successful. Jim Knowles really good at that too. And they had an equally impactful defender in Caleb Downs at safety. All sorts of different things they would ask Caleb Downs to do. Caleb Downs played 900 snaps for Ohio State in the 2024 year, 200 at nickel, 300 as a box safety, 300 as a free safety, came off the edge and pressured a couple of times. He was all over the place. Very similar mindset that Tom Allen had with Abdul Carter. We got this special cat. Let's figure out all sorts of different ways to get him involved. One of the best things you can do as a coordinator is identify your best football players and let them be in positions to impact the football game. Jim Knowles, very similar to what Tom Allen did with Abdul Carter, does a really good job maximizing his personnel. Last thing I like about him, he's a great teacher. Look, it's a hard line, at least in my opinion, to balance where you want to run a really, and James Franklin's talked about this as it pertains to the offensive side of the football, but we're going to talk about it as it pertains to defense. It's a really hard line to walk in terms of, hey, we want to be really complicated. We want to give a lot of different looks. We want to do a lot of different things, a lot of different coverage packages, but also allow our defense to not think too much and go out and play fast. Jim Knowles blends that really well. He's not going to play a ton of base defense. He's going to give a lot of different looks, a lot of different pressure packages, a lot of different personnel packages as well. You see them play, a 4-3-5, a 4-3-4. You'll see them go with a 5-man front. You'll see them go with a 3-man front, play with 3 safeties, all sorts of different personnel packages. But the players play fast. And that's one of those things that it's hard to blend. And what does that tell me about Jim Knowles? He's a great teacher. He knows how to implement and execute the defense he wants to run, and he knows how to be accessible to his players. Hey, we're going to be complicated, but we're going to make it very clear for you guys what's expected and what you guys need to do. Really hard to balance that. Jim Knowles does a really good job. And you look at Penn State and the kind of outlook going into 2025. We said this yesterday, and this is what fires me up the most. Jame Franklin is going to die trying, getting over the hump. And that's been the biggest knock on Jame Franklin during his tenure at Penn State. And there's a lot of head coaches that would just play it safe. And I heard this on the Cover 3 podcast this morning, thought it was a really good point. Hey, bringing in Jim Knowles, a $3 million defensive coordinator, that's going to increase the expectations. There are certain head coaches that just don't want those expectations. They want to be okay with 10-2. Jame Franklin knows he's not going to get fired going 10-2. Jame Franklin says, hey, give me all the expectations. Give me the national championship expectations. We are going to die trying, getting over the hump as his Penn State football program. And as it pertains to winning Big Ten championships and national championships, not a lot of coaches do it. Jame Franklin clearly pushing his chips into the middle of the table. Give him a ton of credit. He is making moves, not only retaining players like Drew, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, but bringing in a guy like Jim Knowles. He's making moves to go win a national championship. And he's put Penn State, you saw Joe Klatt. Joe Klatt put Penn State as the number 1 team in the country going into 2025. Now, I'm not sure if I'm as high on Penn State as Joe Klatt. Make no mistake about it. They're a national championship contender. If they can get that wide receiver position figured out, all the boxes are checked for this team to be extremely dangerous in the 2025 year. We'll see how it plays out. Massive hire for Jim Knowles. He's going to be aggressive like Tom Allen and Manny Diaz. He's going to impact the game. He's going to try to change the game on the defensive side of the football. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.